From the world of science to the world of politics, with a general election likely here in the UK later this year, we're pleased to introduce our second opening speaker, the UK's former, and if the polls are accurate, potentially future energy sector, Ed Miliband, but maybe I shouldn't do it. Ed is MP for Doncaster North since 2005, and during his last Labour administration, he was US Secretary of State for Energy and Climate Change, and in my personal view, really part of the powering forward of solar power in this country. The legislation he pushed through meant that that was the start of the big shift here in the UK. So I want to invite Ed to the stage to give his vision of how he sees the future. Many thanks.
Well, Juliette, thank you so much, and it is great to be here and to follow climate pin-up Jim Ski, rightly named. They say the energy transition is a marathon, not a sprint, and I think that is certainly true of the International Energy Week conference. I'm at mile 1 of your 3-day marathon, and I'm delighted to be here at the kickoff of your conference. I want to pay tribute to you, Juliette, for your brilliant work on energy over many years, and I want to thank all of you in the room for the work you do for Britain and indeed the world on energy. I'm here today to set out Labour's mission to make Britain a clean energy superpower. As Juliette says, we'll have a general election later this year, and I want to talk to you about what we would do if we win that election. I believe this is a true national mission for not just for climate action, but for the jobs of the future, for lower energy bills, for energy security. I often say to audiences, we are in the better lives business in the clean energy transition, and I genuinely believe that. And I want to issue an invitation to all of you to be part of this shared mission, because we need you if we are to succeed as a country and indeed a world. We need the ingenuity of business, we need the resources of investors, we need the expertise of practitioners, and we need the pressure and accountability brought by civil society. And you know what's interesting is that as I go around Britain, I see a huge amount of potential, a sense of national purpose ready to be unleashed. So just in the last couple of weeks, I've met energy businesses in Glasgow desperate for leadership and political drive from government, but too often seeing their renewable carbon capture hydrogen projects stalled by sluggish decision making. I visited the headquarters of Octopus Energy, and I know Greg is talking to you later on today, and I heard about their drive for the decentralized energy system of the future. And the limits, as far as they can see, are not about the scale of their ambitions, but an out-of-date system. I met members of a community on a West London estate who've come together to install solar panels on the roof of their local sports centre to save money and build local community wealth. And they told me of the reaction of other people in the community asking, when can we have ours? When can we have our solar panels? And in my own city of Doncaster last Friday, where I represent, where I'm an MP, I met a company pioneering new methods of hydrogen production, CPH2, frustrated by the lack of support on offer. So I think we have the visionaries for change in this country, and indeed in this room too, but I believe we need a government that matches them, and that's what the next Labour government will seek to do if we're elected. And I want to set out today how I believe together we can achieve the shared national mission of Britain becoming a clean energy superpower. First, my promise is that becoming a clean energy superpower will be one of the top priorities of a Labour government if we win the next election. It will be one of Keir Starmer, our leader's 5 missions for government. We define our mission as creating a zero carbon power system by 2030 as we accelerate to net zero, and I'll say more about this in the course of my remarks. We've chosen it because a clean power system is the linchpin of net zero, given the role of electricity in the future energy mix. And there is a reason, as I said at the outset, for us giving this mission such priority. So among all of the priorities that our leader could have, he has given this top billing among 5 priorities. And that's because he sees it, and I see it, as being about good jobs, growing our economy, lower bills, and energy security. So it's not just a climate mission, it's a security mission, it's a growth mission, it's a cost of living mission. And the reason this sense of priority matters is because it's the only way I believe we can overcome the drift in government that bedevils current efforts to drive towards the vision of a clean energy future. Second, as well as priority of mission, we will deliver clarity of mission. If I'm the Secretary of State after the next election, I already know the North Star for my department, that task of clean power by 2030. This clarity of mission matters because it will lead us as a government to say we cannot reject any power sources, we need them all, providing they have value for money. So just to give you a sense of this, our 2030 clean power aim means doubling onshore wind, trebling solar power, quadrupling offshore wind, with support from nuclear power and other technologies, and backup dispatchable electricity through gas with CCS, hydrogen and battery storage, alongside more flexible demand. So with a Labour government, I want you to know that as businesses and investors, capricious decision-making will not rule out your technology. And we have a very good example of such capricious decision-making in this country. There's currently a ban on onshore wind in England. It's been in place since 2015. It's costing families £180 every year in higher bills. The current government could overturn this ban very easily. It doesn't require legislation. But there is a culture of inertia and stasis. Difficult decisions are ducked. Consultations are used to avoid decision-making. I think this institutional inertia is just not good enough. It blocks business investment and drives up bills for the British people. If there is a Labour government, this will change from day one. One of my first acts, if I'm the Energy Secretary, will be to overturn the onshore wind ban, which can be done at the stroke of a pen. And my pledge to you is a step change in energy and application from a Labour government, not just on the onshore wind ban, but on every issue that matters in driving forward the energy transition. So as well as priority of mission and clarity of mission, third, what I offer you is a willingness to use the power of government to plan and deliver. And I think both of these are important, and I want to spend a bit of time talking about each. When I was Secretary of State for Energy and Climate Change, we set out the first low-carbon transition plan for Britain, a route map, if you like, for where Britain was going to go and how it would make the transition. If we're in government after the next election, we will set out a very clear route map again, sector by sector, for delivery. And I want to emphasize to this audience that this will involve using all of the assets at our disposal. I know many here are members in oil and gas, and it is vital we have a managed transition in your sector for energy security, for workers, and so we can use the extraordinary infrastructure of the North Sea for our future. That's why the policy we've set out is to use existing oil and gas fields for their lifetime and deliver a plan for the North Sea so it can serve us for CCS, hydrogen, and other future industries. We will develop such a plan working with you. That willingness to use the power of government is not just about having a plan, but it's also about breaking down the barriers to delivery. So the truth about our mission of clean power by 2030 is it's obviously a very, very ambitious task, as many in the energy industry have said to me. It would indeed be world leading. But it depends, the achievement of it depends not primarily on the scale of public investment, but our ability to remove the obstacles to private investment. What I call the four horsemen of the apocalypse: grid, planning, supply chain, and skills. And in advance of government, we're working on the detailed plan to remove those barriers, and we've already set out some of what we will do. We will set timetables of months, not years, for the different aspects of the planning process, and we'll ensure that net zero is at the heart of all relevant regulators' duties. So every agency has a responsibility to help deliver our mission. On grid, we'll use our new public entity, GB Energy, to convene the transmission operators to speed up procurement. On skills, we'll reform the apprenticeship levy to help fill the gaps we face. On supply chains, we'll partner with you to build up our domestic capacity. I want you to be in no doubt that we stand ready to do what it takes with political will to help unleash the private investment to help deliver the future that I am laying out. Fourth, alongside this commitment to break down barriers, we'll also invest public resources to help catalyse the private investment we need as a country. And I just want to be very clear with you about my view on this. I think it's different from the current government. We see public investment crowding in, not crowding out, private investment. That is the lesson of the US Inflation Reduction Act. So Labour's commitment is a major public investment in the future. just to run through some of our commitments. Our National Wealth Fund will invest 1.8 billion to upgrade our ports so offshore wind turbines can be manufactured here at home, not simply towed in from overseas. We'll invest 1 billion extra in industrial clusters to accelerate the deployment of carbon capture and storage that Juliette was talking to Jim about, and hydrogen. Invest 1.5 billion in electric battery factories to secure the future of our automotive sector. Invest 2.5 billion in steel to secure a future for the industry. And we'll also do something else. We'll provide a new incentive to manufacture in Britain with a £1.5 billion British jobs bonus. And this is, again, learning from IRA, a clear, transparent incentive for your businesses to put their manufacturing facilities in Britain's industrial heartlands and coastal communities. It really matters that we see this as the big economic opportunity of the 21st century. And finally, Great British Energy, our new publicly owned energy company, capitalised at over £8 billion over the Parliament, will invest in leading-edge technologies like floating wind and small modular reactors in partnership with the private sector. So in this way, the commitments I've made are about the billions in public investment, de-risking, crowding in, catalysing tens, indeed hundreds of billions of private investment for the benefit of our country. And we also want to work with you to ensure that every job in energy is a good one with a proper role for trade unions, which we know can boost wages, productivity and safety. Fifth and finally, and I think in a way most importantly of all in terms of what we will offer that is different, this mission will be a whole government effort with the authority of the Prime Minister if Labour wins the election. I think we all know the current problems of a silo-based approach and the way government works. I hear it again and again from businesses up and down the country. Decisions lingering for months or even years in agencies and on ministerial desks, and indeed the National Infrastructure Commission was warning about this only this week. A lack of capacity across government and agencies to get decisions made, and a lack of political will to get problems unblocked. As I go around the country, I talk to so many people who tell me of examples of where they have great projects, but they cannot come to fruition because of these types of problems, and they make people want to tear their hair out, and I understand it. We are absolutely determined to end this situation. The whole of government will be laser focused on this mission. The 2030 Clean Power Plan will have the authority of the Prime Minister if Labour wins. And we're determined also to learn the lessons of past successes, which achieved things on timetables that some thought impossible, but that turned out to be absolutely possible. The most notable recent example, which many of you will know about, is the UK government's Vaccines Task Force, which put us at the forefront of a global effort to produce a COVID vaccine and save millions of lives. This was about a different way of doing government. And there are clear lessons about the way government works, in our view, for our very different 2030 Clean Power task. It was a clear national priority. Government and industry working side by side, proper evidence-based policy making, the clear stamp of the Prime Minister to make it happen, and perhaps most importantly, no department or agency able to block the way. This is the approach and the thinking that we are doing now in advance of government so that we can be day one ready if we win the election. And I think with this approach we can succeed. So in issuing the invitation to be part of our mission, I offer priority of mission, clarity of mission, a willingness to use the power of government to plan and deliver, catalytic public investment, and a whole of government approach with the authority of the Prime Minister. Let me conclude, Juliette, on this note. I can't think of any more important task for our country than creating a clean energy superpower. The truth is that we face interlocking crises in our country and indeed across much of the developed world. Energy insecurity, a stagnant economy, the climate crisis. And the truth about these three different interlocking crises is actually they can be addressed by the actions we take in the clean energy transition. Hundreds of thousands of jobs, lower energy bills, energy security, climate leadership, all are within our grasp. I think our country needs us to work together to make all this happen, and the world needs and indeed wants Britain to lead once again. I see this as the defining project of our generation. I feel excited and inspired by the prospect of working with you to make it happen, and I hope you will all accept my invitation to be partners in this mission. Thank you very much.
Ed, thank you for kicking off International Energy Week with such an inspirational sort of vision. Coming back to a couple of more practical sort of today issues, we know there are some challenges in terms of how people are visioning this transition from the security of their own personal jobs. So you've got an industry who have got to move, and particularly we're seeing sort of concern in northeast of the UK and in Scotland, Aberdeen, where people feel their jobs are at risk and they don't necessarily see themselves in this future energy transition. What do you think, what can you do to help this be a just transition, particularly for people's jobs in the UK?
I mean, look, it's an absolutely crucial question that you're asking, Juliet, and it is our absolute commitment that this will be a just transition, and it needs government to plan it and deliver it, working with business. I mean, I am a coal mining MP from a coal mining constituency in Doncaster North. I know the dangers of an unjust transition. So what are the key things in this? One, it's got to be a managed transition, which is, as I explained in my speech, our commitment to existing oil and gas fields, even though we're not going to issue new licenses. Secondly, the truth is that the future of the parts of our country that are most dependent on oil and gas will be defined most of all by the decisions we make on the clean energy transition. As a union leader put it to me, the truth about the workers in these areas is that they are the people who can decarbonize our country. They're the people who can decarbonize our country in hydrogen, in carbon capture and storage, in offshore wind. But it's not happening at the moment. There is no plan for this transition under the current government. And that's what we've got to do, and that is what we are determined to do and working on. And government has to do the plan. It also has got to be willing to make the public investment. GB Energy is absolutely about the public sector playing a role, working with the private sector to deliver those good jobs of the future, but also, influencing private investment so that the investment takes place in those areas of the country that most need it. I mentioned our British Jobs Bonus. That is about directing to oil and gas communities, to coastal communities. The real lesson for me of IRA, I think, is of the Inflation Reduction Act, is something like 85% of the investments have taken place in areas that are below average incomes in the United States. And so we need to learn from that approach. Last thing I'll say is this, which is I'm determined to work with the sector. I have a good dialogue with OE UK and the other oil and gas companies. And, what I very much have felt over the last year, 18 months, is that dialogue is important in opposition, and it's going to be even more important if we get into government.
Yeah. And just sort of building on that, one of the things that sort of Jim pointed out in his talk was that we're going to really have to address this issue about demand and demand side. And we touched on some of the big challenges, sort of whether it's planning, grid, onshore wind, all of those completely, absolutely need to be done. But this seems to be a very tricky area. How do you think you're going to start to crack that nut? Because it's going to be super important to deliver on the energy transition. I mean,
look, it is the whole area of energy efficiency and more flexible demand seems to me to be a deeply unaddressed area and is a massive failure of public policy. We have set out plans for what we call a Warm Homes Plan, which will double the amount of investment that the government is planning for the next Parliament in energy efficiency in homes. I think that is a really, really important thing that needs to be done. And as I say, it hasn't been done for a long time. When we were in power in 2010, I think we were insulating something like of the order of 2 million homes a year. So this can be done. I think sort of the observation I would make, though, we've got another government scheme which is failing, is, again, it needs a proper sense of plan. You know, this cannot be a sort of the part of what has bedeviled this area is a sort of stop-start process which has taken place under this government. You need a line of sight and a proper plan for this transition, including decarbonising heat. Let me just say one other thing, and I mentioned my visit to Octopus. I mean, I think the other thing that we are underestimating, there are a number of things that we are underestimating, but one of the things I think we're underestimating is the extent to which demand flexibility can play a role in the future system. And, you know, it's been very interesting that when the national grid in Britain and the future system operator have trialled flexible demand, time of day tariffs and so on, they've actually been surprised on the upside by the response of the public. And I think that we can think about this as a very, you know, we've got to build grid, don't get me wrong, but we can think about this in very monolithic terms, that this is just simply building lots of large kit all around the country. And of course it is that, but it is also about the extent to which this becomes a much more decentralized system. You know, the role of EVs, the role of heat pumps as a source of that decentralization. And I think if you do both of those things, you've got to build the grid, but you've also got to make this a much more decentralized system and take advantage of that. It, in a sense, makes the overall grid task, you know, a much, much easier effort. Just one other thing I'd say, Juliette, is this, which is, you know, I said it sort of a little bit in my speech. I think there's a tendency for us to talk about this, and I think it's certainly true of parts of the Green movement, in much too hair-shirtish a way. You know, this is a positive vision to make people's lives better. This is about warmer homes. It is about good jobs for people. It is about lower bills. Now, of course, that isn't to say there aren't trade-offs and difficulties of managing this transition, but I think we should sort of all feel that this is positive and exciting and, you know, the vision for the future that the country needs, rather than some burden that we've just simply got to kind of, you know, take on, and it's all going to be, you know, very, very difficult. Of course it's difficult, but I think there's a massive, massive kind of positive set of benefits that we can deliver to people.
Yeah. Ed, thank you so much for coming in this morning and starting off IE Week with amazing visions. I hope that the next couple of days we'll really start to get down to the work and actually start to envisage what that's really going to be. But good luck and thank you.
Thank you very much.